So in this episode, we are looking at Feeder Fresh, which is this stuff right here. You may have seen it at some bird stores, and finding out whether this is safe to use for our backyard birds or not. I first saw this at some bird stores before. It was like right by checkout, and I asked about it because I think I was getting stuff for her goldfinches at the time, and they said, this is great stuff. It makes your seed last longer, and it helps your feeder stay cleaner and everything. The thing is, it was like, I don't know, 10, 11 bucks at the time, and I was just like, I don't know, like I'm already spending a lot of money. I don't want to spend more on a gimmick. I just didn't trust it, so I passed. But down the road, I got a free sample of it, and I decided to actually try it out. And so all I did was I just added a little bit, maybe like a ½ inch to the bottom of my finch tube feeder, and then added the thistle on top of it. Actually, it's Niger, not thistle officially. But anyway, so I added that on top of it. And I think 2 weeks later, when I went out to clean my feeders, it had rained a little bit too. So I was expecting the feeders to be super cakey and a big pain to clean. But to my surprise, when I went to pour all the old seed out, it just came out perfectly. There wasn't very much left, and it definitely wasn't cakey. And so I was like, oh, okay. I mean, they're not kidding around about this stuff. It really makes it easier to manage. Not to say that we can't manage otherwise, but it just makes it a ton easier. So I asked the community about whether this was safe or not for birds, whether they trust it. And overwhelmingly, the answers were yes, this is excellent. They had never had a sick bird or anything like that. But one person voiced their concerns. And so in this episode, I'm going to talk about what this stuff actually is, like the material it is, just some background information about it, kind of the science or the hypothetical science behind it. And then those concerns and whether or not it's safe, and what do the authorities like Cornell suggest about this. So that's what this episode is all about today. So to start, let's talk about what this product is. This is made of silicon dioxide, which is sand. It's basically sand. The difference is it's not just straight up silicon dioxide, it's anhydrous, which doesn't mean a whole lot to you. That's just a big chemical word. All that means is that these types of particles, these silica particles, have micropores inside of them that are meant to trap water, and that's how this works as a moisture absorbent. So it's catching the water and keeping the seed dry as a result. What's also neat about this is that overall, like from a science perspective, it's pretty inert. Again, it's basically sand. The cool thing about this is that this anhydrous silicon dioxide has been, or at least versions of it have been FDA approved for cosmetics and as a food additive for anti-caking. And that's exactly what this does. So if you have ever used this in your feeders, then you know that it keeps it from caking up and turning into like just this rock hard, awful mess. So if you're listening to me and you're like, okay, well, it's FDA approved, so it must be safe for birds, we gotta put the brakes on that for a minute, because the thing about birds is that they're very small, and so too much of anything can be problematic. And for birds, it doesn't take much for anything to become too much, if that makes sense. So now we kind of know that it's this sand with micropores inside that traps water, so basically is pretty inert from the sounds of it. The other thing about this product is that in general, a lot of birds use grit to help with digestion, but that's not the case for all birds. So let's look into the concerns. When I put this out to the community, overwhelmingly everybody is pleased with this product. They really like it, and it really does help keep their feeders clean. But one lady who is an experienced wildlife rehabber, specifically with songbirds, she brought up some really important questions that we need to consider. Number one, there is a such thing as too much grit in the system, and from her experience, that has been a really bad situation. Number two, since this is a desiccating material, this is a moisture absorbing material, what happens after accidental ingestion? Will this dehydrate birds? So she had some great questions, and I reached out to Cornell Lab of Ornithology and asked them for their feedback. I also asked if there were any resources. The problem with this product is it's not well studied. So again, the science is there. Overall, it's pretty inert. It's FDA approved, or at least certain versions are FDA approved. you know, it's just micropores in sand, basically. The thing with science, though, is that things have to be tested, and you want your results to be reliable and replicable and everything. And that just, we don't have that. We don't have enough scientific testing of this. So what Cornell said is that the advice they give on any kind of additive, they say don't add things to food products for birds, because you just don't know. And maybe if there was testing down the road that we could establish that it was 100% safe for birds, or at least, you know, heck, even 99% safe for birds, you know, that would be wonderful, but we don't have that. So Cornell's stance is always to avoid additives in bird feeding products. Another thing about Feeder Fresh is that it's going to work for a while, but it's not going to work for like months and months and months. Feeder Fresh is going to only work for so long before it's kind of oversaturated, and you will still get cakey seed in the end. So, you know, it only lasts to a certain point. It can only do so much, and then it can't do enough. One thing I have found is that hanging baffles over your feeders help make it last longer. As an example, I had Feeder Fresh in in both of my finch feeders, and then went on vacation, so I'm speaking from experience here. I come back and one is kind of cakey after the fact, and the one with the umbrella, or basically that hanging baffle over the feeder, that one poured out. So the baffle paired with the Feeder Fresh actually made things a lot easier, and it did make it hang on a little bit. So if you're trying to find ways to get your seed to be easier to manage when you're cleaning your feeders, hanging baffle is a huge help. And you know, if there is a rain, it's not going to be as affected as it would be if it was just hanging out there. So those are the benefits, and some of the like claimed benefits that maybe aren't all there to think about. So, okay, so in the end, we have Cornell saying don't use it. We have the science that says, you know, it may not be terrible. And then we have some heavy concerns from wildlife rehabbers that, you know, are worth considering. So what is my take? I lean towards caution. I really, really think that it is important to keep your feeders clean. And if you're someone who has like 1,000 feeders in your backyard, then not using something like this could actually be make it really hard to manage. However, like I said, I lean on the side of caution. I'm not going to condemn someone from using it, and on certain situations, I myself might use it as well. If it's like, you know, I'm not going to be able to check my feeders as well as I need to be, or I know that there's going to be a lot of rain. So it's more of like a sparing and strategic use for this, that, you know, if you're going to do it with care and caution. Another thing about this is if you are going to use it, some people mix it in with their seed. Don't do that. Because accidental ingestion is questionable, let's just be careful about how we put it in our feeders. So instead, just fill the base of your feeder about 1/2 inch to 1 inch. That's all you need. And then pour your seed over it. The other thing is, if you're using it, don't let your feeders get completely empty and have that stuff exposed. You know, have there be about 1 inch of seed layered over it, you know, and then swap out your feeder. That way there's a barrier to prevent birds from accidentally ingesting it. And again, I'm not saying I completely recommend this. I'm just saying there are some ways to use this safely. Some of you might be in the situation where you're totally confused now. On the one hand, it sounds like maybe you shouldn't use it. On the other hand, there are benefits, especially, you know, as far as keeping your feeders clean, and you're just not sure what to do. If you want to be safe, just start out with that hanging baffle. I'll have a link in the description for these things, but that's going to keep the rain off of your feeders. It's going to prevent some of that moisture. So that alone is going to reduce that caking situation and make it a little easier to clean your feeders. The other thing is just, you know, soak your feeders. That's something that Cornell even says, just soak your feeders when they're caking like that, and eventually things will loosen up, and then you can shake it out and clean it out and scrub it out with a scrub brush if you need to. It does get a little harder if you're using one of those metal mesh screen feeders for your finches, but tube feeders, it's pretty easy to scrub out and everything. And then if the hanging baffle isn't working for you, go ahead and try this, see how you like it, but again, go with a lot of care when you're using it. For more goldfinch feeding tips and best practices, there is a free downloadable booklet that goes over things like how long a bag of seed lasts, the purpose behind different types of feeders, how often to clean feeders, types of plants they like, and so much more. The link will be in the description if you want to take a look.